Hello, everyone, and welcome to WITI Conversations. I'm Kayla, the host of the show. And on today's show, we have a special guest with us, Laura Owen. Thank you for being with us, Laura.
Thank you. I'm pleased to be here.
And so, Laura, I mean, it's kind of hard to actually introduce Laura because she's an amazing woman and she's accomplished so many things. So I'll let her do a little bit of that introduction here in a moment. But how I got connected with Laura is she's an Online Trading Academy student. And one of the things that Laura is going to talk to us today about are the 10 most important things for your financial life that you need to know. And so, Laura, welcome. We're so excited to have you here with us today, first of all.
Well, thank you so much. And Kayla, I'm not only an OTA student, but before you and I met through this podcast, I actually have been a fan of yours, watching you in a lot of the training videos at OTA.
Wow, what an honor it is to hear that. I love that. It's also nice to have a dialogue face to face than just like a video that you've seen at some point in time. So I always love the chance to actually get to speak with students. So this is a treat for me. So, Laura, would you just tell us a little bit about your background? I know we probably don't have as much time as we need for you to explain everything, but just give us some highlights of kind of your life and your career and what eventually brought you to Online Trading Academy. So take it away.
Well, I've done a lot of things in my life. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've owned and operated and started a number of companies. My last company was a tech company, and I took that company public. That was a really fun ride. I've also worked in the Middle East. I was an advisor to the Ministry of Health in Saudi Arabia, healthcare. That was a fascinating experience. I've worked in investment banking. I was Secretary of Commerce in Kansas. So I've done a lot of different things. But when I was a young woman, I was a certified financial planner. I was a financial advisor and had Series 7 and all of the other licenses that go with that. It was a really interesting journey. And as a result of that, my passion while I was in that industry was I loved helping women because I felt that women were really just not as involved in their personal finances as maybe they could or should be. And women outlive men by a long shot. And so when something happens to a spouse, a husband, the women are often really left in a very difficult situation because they don't know where things are.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I just have to ask a quick question out of my curiosity, but when you were a certified financial planner, were there a lot of women in that industry with you, or?
No, actually not. No, it was actually kind of a strange thing for a woman to do at that time. It was kind of a strange thing for a woman to be working in the Middle East, as well. And, a lot of things I've done in my career was kind of a strange time, I guess you could say. Things have come a long way, thank goodness. They really have. But, I've had the incredible fortune to do a lot of different things in my life. And I think that it keeps life interesting.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I love that you were sort of a kind of a forerunner to a lot of this. You were a certified financial planner and wasn't really many other women as CFPs at the time or working in the Middle East. And it's pretty amazing. So speaking of you being a certified financial planner and kind of that passion that it gave you for teaching women about the things that they need to know in their household finances, I know that you were a speaker and you actually went out, hit the road and actually to tell people about this. So if we could glean a little bit from your knowledge with that, and would you share with us these 10 most important things that we need to know, that women need to know for their financial life?
You bet. Well, it was a long time ago that I did all of those speeches, and I had that so committed to memory, that whole speech back then, I could do it in my sleep. And so in preparation for today's discussion, I had to reconstruct that list because I didn't keep any of my notes from those days in that presentation. But I reconstructed it. I think I've captured it. And, I always said that women didn't need to understand what a PE ratio was necessarily, or, a lot of things that women are sometimes, even men, very intimidated about financial markets. But these are the top 10 things you must know. And if you don't know these things, I encourage you to sit down with your spouse and find out either where these things are, or if they don't exist, don't get mad at your spouse. Just let's make it a priority to get these things done, right? So first and foremost, have a will. Number 2, have a trust. Number 3, have an emergency fund. Number 4, know who your attorneys are. Number 5, know who your financial advisors are. Number 6, know who your tax advisors are. Number 7, have 7 years of tax returns, know where they are. Number 8, have a list of your assets and liabilities. Number 9, know where your mortgage document is and who your mortgage banker is. And number 10, know about your insurance coverages. So for some people, it may include a whole bunch of things, and others it may be simple: life insurance, property insurance, health insurance, disability insurance, so personal property insurance. There's so many different categories, and what applies to you may be different. But those 10 things are things you absolutely need to know, need to have in place, and need to know where those documents are.
I bet you that when you spoke on these things, for a lot of women, this was like, in a way, a relief. Like, I don't need to know this ratio or this formula. I just need to kind of put myself in this partnership with my spouse and understand these things. What was the feedback that you got as you were on the road, kind of talking about these things with women?
Overwhelming positive. And, I remember one talk in particular. It was one of the last times that I shared this presentation with a group of women here in my community in Kansas City. And it was held at the Marriott in Overland Park, packed room. There were hundreds of women there. And the entire time I spoke, there was a woman on the side of the room that talked through my entire presentation, which is really annoying when you're a speaker. Definitely. And kept walking over to that side of the room while I was speaking, hoping maybe she would stop, and she didn't stop. And it was just really frustrating. So as I wrapped up my presentation, I always shared that top 10 list and gave people a handout so they could literally take that home and talk to their spouses about it. And this woman who had been talking through the presentation, she stood up and she said to everyone in the room, and by the way, she is extremely well known in Kansas City. She said to everyone in the room, many of you know that I lost my husband last year, and we have homes all over the world, but I had no idea we didn't have a will. I had no idea what my assets or liabilities were. I didn't know who our financial advisors were, who our attorneys were. And so she expressed that she and her sons had spent the better part of the prior year trying to define these things, get their arms around it. And it was an incredible stress for her. And she just admonished everyone in the audience to take that list that I shared and go home and sit down with their spouses and get clear on what those things are. So what appeared to be kind of a frustrating part of the presentation really turned out to be the exclamation point, because everyone, I guarantee you, every woman in that room went home that night and had a sit down. And it was a great gift to everyone in that room that she shared that information.
Absolutely. I mean, plus the last thing that you want to be doing when you just lost your husband or your spouse is trying to sift through all this information. It's something that could totally be avoided if she had, had that conversation prior to that.
Yeah, that's right. A lot of people assume that just because someone's wealthy, that they have all their ducks in order. Well, I learned from some of the clientele that I had. I had some amazing clientele. I mean, I worked with attorneys, not always having wills or trusts, etc. It's mind-blowing. It's the shoemaker who doesn't have shoes, right? And doctors and generals and people who really have their act together in their professional lives. And see, that's the thing that's really a misnomer, is that it's very common that people don't have their act together because people don't consider what could happen, right? What worst case scenario, right? You don't want to plan totally around negative things, but you do need to plan. And so that was really my goal, was to share with them, to be a part of that process and to actually help their spouse through that process.
Yeah.
Very often there's this assumption, especially when I was younger. It's changing a lot, but I think it's still a problem. There's this expectation that somehow men are genetically born to understand all of this stuff and to know all of this. Guess what? They don't. And it's an unfair burden that we place on them, frankly. And, so often when I would sit down with couples, and I always preferred to work with couples, right, as opposed to just the man of the house, I wanted to work with them as couples because I wanted the woman to be engaged, to understand what was where, right, and why. And so I found that women, if you hear a little barking, I apologize. He's really excited about being a part of this podcast.
Get it. It's
so I found that men were often, it was really embarrassing for them when we started talking about things like life insurance or their emergency fund, things like this that they really should have in place, but so often they don't. So when there is a tragedy, and I've experienced this too, where something happens to the husband unexpectedly and the wife is left with no life insurance, no savings, doesn't know where things are, and that's very sad and unnecessary. So it also helps to relieve that burden on the spouse. If you do this as a team, no one's in the dark. It doesn't raise questions about, are we ready? Are we not ready for life? Those kinds of things.
Right.
So I'm always encouraged people to do this as a team.
I love that. And, not to say that there's this assumption, as you said, and we're getting better, and that there's this assumption that men are born with this, but nobody's born with this. And,
No.
Something that you and I have chatted about was that nor does the education system prepare you for this. I mean, they don't teach you about kind of basic things in finance. And so it's sort of this mysterious world, and yet one that's really, really important for your adult life beyond, your parents' house or beyond high school or in college, So
I agree 100%. It's financial literacy, as it's known, is so incredibly important, and it isn't taught. And I find that people often kind of beat themselves up because they don't have their ducks in order. And you shouldn't beat yourself up. Nobody becomes an expert in anything overnight. It takes years and years of learning, little by little. It's baby steps, no matter what it is that you're trying to master in life, right? So the same is true with this. It's not something that you need to feel like you need to learn everything overnight, but start with that top 10 list and then gradually start to allow yourself, be open to the possibility that learning about finance a little at a time is incredibly empowering. Incredibly empowering. It applies to so many things in your life, but very often the understanding of some of these things has incredible benefit in your long-term success, both personally and professionally.
I think also even just taking that step to start learning about it, eventually you start to become even more curious or realize that it's not something that's so mysterious that it's kind of this intangible thing that I wouldn't be able to learn that kind of a thing. No, it's something that's doable for yourself. At least that's what I find, is that once I start opening a door to something, it's like, okay, now I know this. Almost like when you click on the Wikipedia page, I learned of this, but now there's this other link here and I want to know what that is. And I want to know what that is. I sort of feel that that's this world of finance, that if you were just to take that first step and start with the list that you just shared with us. And then from there, that's going to open up a lot of other questions and things that women can learn, or anybody can learn. Really.
And this is why I really love my OTA relationship, because people who I was in class with, and I formed some incredible lifelong friendships as a result of OTA. A lot of people were, for example, a lot of people who came from the professional world, right? But there were just as many people, men and women, who were everyday, housewives and women who have never done anything in finance in their personal lives or professional careers. And they were at first really intimidated. I don't know if I can do this. But frankly, the ones who were left scratching their heads and saying, oh gosh, I didn't understand that. Surprisingly, sometimes those were the ones who thought they already had it all figured out. Right. People who came from professional